Hi, I'm Graham Hubbs. I'm the chair of the Department of Politics and Philosophy at the University of Idaho. And today, I'm going to be giving a brief lecture on philosophical explanations of the nature of money. So, when we're thinking about the nature of money, there are a variety of questions we might ask. And the one that I want to focus our attention on primarily is what we can call the basic ontological question, which is what is money? In general, an ontological question about something asks, what is the thing's essence, if we are comfortable talking about essences. In the history of philosophy, there has been resistance towards thinking about things having essences at all. So if we don't want to say that, we might say instead, what are the defining characteristics that make something a bit of money? So here is a picture of a $100 bill. If we look at it and try to figure out what features of the bill make it a bit of money, a lot of the stuff that jumps off the screen at us are not necessary characteristics for something being money. The numbers 100 are not necessary. There are bits of money that have different denominations or differently denominated, and so they involve different numbers. Ben Franklin's face is not necessary. There are different famous people on the money of the United States and on monies from other countries. The shape doesn't seem necessary. The fact that it's made out of a bit of a paper-like substance doesn't seem to be necessary. None of the physical characteristics, in fact, seem to be necessary at all for something to be a bit of money. So if we can't look at the tangible nature of things like dollar bills and coins in order to say what makes money a bit of money, well, then what is it that's going to make something a bit of money? I think that to make progress here, we'll do well to focus on some sub questions that, if we can answer them, will help us answer the basic ontological question. So first, can we say what the purpose or function of money is? Can we say what money is for in the first place? Maybe that'll help us answer the basic ontological question. Next, can we say what properties some bit of money has that allow it to perform its function? The function of a doorstop, for example, is to keep a door from shutting when we don't want it to shut. And the properties that allow a doorstop to do that include being made of a weight and a material that creates enough friction with the ground that the door doesn't close. So what properties does money have that allow it to do whatever money's function is? And finally, how does it get these properties? If we're thinking about the doorstop example, the doorstop gets its properties by being cut in a certain way out of a certain material. Is there an analog, if we're trying to make sense of what money is, as to how it gets the properties that allows it to do what it does? Okay, if we're thinking about money's functions and are approaching the first of the sub questions that I've raised, the functionalist answer to the basic question, which is agreed upon by both the old and the new paradigms of money, and we'll get to the old and the new paradigms going forward here in a second, is the following three textbook functions of money. So the first is that money is a means of payment. This is one of the main things you do with money is you pay for stuff with it. So that phrase, means of payment, is just shorthand for saying that it makes it easier or perhaps even possible to pay for things. An example of this idea is that coins and banknotes can be used as a medium of market exchange. Now, in some textbooks, you'll see the medium of exchange function labeled and separated out from the means of payment function. We don't need to go into the details here. In either case, what we're thinking about is the way that money can be used to pay for stuff. Second function that you'll commonly see listed on the list of functions for money is that of a unit of account or a measure of value. So the function here is to specify how much one needs to pay for some goods or obligations, such as prices, fees, fines, or taxes. Now note here that this function of money is accomplished by its abstract concept and not by concrete bits of money. If you want to put your house on the market and you want to price it, you don't need to have the total amount of physical money in coins or dollar bills or even in your bank account electronically recorded in order to say, I want to sell my house for $400,000. And if you want to negotiate with somebody about that price, neither of you actually need to have the bills, coins, or even the electronic representations of that money in your account. All of the deliberation about how much the house is going to cost takes place using the concept of money in the abstract. You don't need concrete instances of it to do the pricing or the negotiating. And finally, third function that we commonly see on the textbook list of functions is store of value. John Smithen has argued that the store of value function is not appropriately listed, or rather should not be on the list of basic money functions. He follows the economist Hicks in that regard, noting that money is actually not a particularly good store of value. But I'm going to leave it on the list, and not just because it's commonly features in the textbooks, but also because it allows us to ask the question that will really help us get at the basic ontological question, which is, well, precisely what sort of value is it that is purportedly stored by money? It kind of begs the question, if we're trying to understand money's ontology, to just say it stores value, sure, but what value is stored? If we can answer that, maybe we will get some greater clarity into what the nature of money is. So when we're thinking about what kind of value money stores, the first account, the Orthodox account, is that the value of money is its value in market exchange, kind of thing that would take place in the sort of market that you see pictured on the screen. Now, the Austrian economists Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek called theories of market exchange catalactic, and I'll use that term to refer to these kinds of monies, or these kinds of theories. I will call this catalactic theory of money. The basics go like this. In barter, goods have a value that differs in kind from what they are used for. Call the former exchange value, that's the value they have in exchange, and the latter use value, that's the value you have when you take it home and you use the thing. If you go to the market with something that no one wants, then no matter what the use value of what you have is, it'll have no exchange value in that market, and you won't be able to trade it. In the slides I said, it doesn't matter whether it's me or you who's got the stuff that no one wants to trade for. This is inconvenient, especially if you or I go to the market needing things, say, to eat, or needing something crucial to make our life better. So if only we had something that always had exchange value because people always wanted it, then we would never face that problem. If you and I both could rest assured when we went to the market with this thing that everyone would always take, then we would always be able to get the stuff that we want there, and we would never face the problem of having goods that no one wants to trade for. Karl Marx gives us this nice phrase about how in the marketplace gold might come to have this property of being universally accepted. He says that it crystallizes out of the process of exchange and becomes something that is universally accepted in exchange. So its value, it gets a special new value, which is that of being a universal medium of exchange. And when a commodity like gold or silver or whatever it may be ends up having this property of being universally used in exchange, its concept can then be used to price all other commodities in the market, and then you've got something that has taken on the money form. Okay, now if we take that account of money and then answer the three sub-questions to the basic ontological question, we'll get some clarity about what the account is telling us money is by definition, or if we were comfortable talking about essences in its essence. So what's the purpose or function of money? It's to ameliorate the inconveniences of market exchange. That's what drives it into existence. What properties does money have that allows it to perform this function? The most important property it has is the general willingness of market participants to accept it for payment. But there are specific physical properties that precious metal have that are useful for performing this function. I call this the good old days of coin, and that's a mythic phrase, as we'll see as we go along. Its divisibility and portability are cited even as far back as Aristotle as properties that would make precious metal a good thing to serve as a universal medium of exchange. And how does money get these properties? There's various accounts about how this might work, but the key thing to know to contrast this theory of money's ontology from the opposing view is simply that it emerges out of market activity. And in fact, that's why I like to call this kind of account the catalactic account, to show that whatever it is, the material that money takes on, and it even could be immaterial, the value rests in the market activity that gives rise to this universal medium of exchange. The alternative view, which is the heterodox account of the nature of money, is that the value of money is its value to either claim or discharge debt. That if we want to think about money properly, we think about it in the context of debt first and foremost, and not barter, as the catalactic theory would have us do. In the state theory of money, George Friedrich Knapp labeled this view chartalism after the Latin for carta, which just means token or ticket. Now, there are cartalist views that are not state theory views of the sort that George Friedrich Knapp put forward. But the only ones that will be really of concern to us today are those that tell the following kind of story that I'm about to tell, which, as will become clear in just a moment, are rightly regarded as state theories. So the competing account to the Orthodox theory, the catalactic theory, goes like this. When large-scale civilizations came into existence, for example, namely Mesopotamia, there were many modes of collective provisioning. Bartering was not particularly significant. So this is one place where it differs at the outset from the catalactic view. Here are some other ways in which people collectively provision themselves. There was lending, neighborly gifting, and central management at the temple. The central management of provisioning required complex accounting and bookkeeping. There was a lot of people to keep track of and a lot of movement of goods and obligations to keep track of as well. Moreover, the central management of the state also required a system for assessing fines and punishments. Not only was it keeping track of the central distribution of goods, but if you had a cow that I accidentally killed and I didn't have a cow to be able to give you in return for accidentally killing your cow, I would need to give you something that would settle the debt that I incurred. But whatever I would give you would not be a cow. It would be incommensurable in certain ways. So we had to find some way to make something that was not going to have the same use as a cow commensurable to you to settle the debt. And so the state intervenes to come up with equivalencies in order to say how many of whatever it is I've got, shoes, beer, or whatever, would be equal to the cow that I killed for yours. These pressures, the bookkeeping pressures for administering state provisioning, and the equivalency pressures for trying to figure out if I accidentally kill your cow, how much to give you so that we can settle our debt, lead to the need for a universal unit of account. And once this unit of account is defined, then it could be used for private, that is, market transactions. So according to the state theory, both the state and money are prior to the existence of markets with prices, which is exactly the opposite of what the Orthodox catalactic theory says. Okay, so let's now take this account and run it over our three sub-questions for the basic ontological question. First, what's the function of money? It's to denominate debts with the concept of money and then to represent specific debts with physical manifestations of that money. And according to the state theory, the debts in question are debts either to the state or determined by the state. And so the concept of money and then physical manifestations thereof aid the state in managing its economic and legal activity. What properties does money have that allow it to perform this function? Well, according to the state theory, it's the power of the state to demand tax, fee, and fine payments in its own currency, in the unit of account that it defines. And how does money get these properties? Well, however states obtain and enforce the power of law, specifically the power to tax, to charge fees, and to fine. According to this theory of the ontology of money, the way to answer the question, how does money get its properties, is going to be answered rather by whatever your theory of the origins of state authority is, which is a topic for philosophy of law, and it's a basic topic for political philosophy. Wherein does state authority rest? The authority to make and enforce law. So the money and the study of money's ontology is actually a subset of political theory and legal theory more broadly. Okay, well, now we've got our two different accounts of money, the Orthodox catalactic theory and the Heterodox cartalist theory. How do we decide between them? Note that both of these accounts, at least on the surface, are origin stories explaining what money is by how it came to be. Each history has a setup of initial conditions, and those initial conditions give rise to some sort of problem, and then money is introduced as a solution to the problem. The implication here is that what we wanted from a theory of money in the first place is an explanation of how it came to be, that the explanatory itch that we wanted scratched was going to be given by an account of its origin. And both of the theories seem to share that assumption. So does this mean that the debates about the ontology of money are fundamentally a debate about history? Well, if that's so, there are many examples of collective provisioning that do not involve truck and barter. And moreover, the Mesopotamian record suggests that the cartolist is correct about the shekel, which is the oldest known unit of account. That is, that it was defined by the state first, used for the kinds of state functions that I suggested in the previous slides, and then only later was used in markets for market functions. So does that mean that the cartolist wins? Well, you should maybe back up for a second here and say, I came across this lecture on a philosophy website, and the person who's speaking to me is a philosopher by training, and now they're telling me a whole bunch about history. If this is just a matter of history, then so what? Maybe the history of money is interesting on its own right if you're into that kind of thing, but we came here to study the ontology of money, and for many kinds of things, their ontology is investigated separate from their history. If you want to know the ontology of the social ontology of chess, for example, the history of chess might be interesting, but what you want to know are the constitutive rules that make chess chess. And especially if you want to be good at chess, history might be something that you read about at night as you go to bed, but in the time that you're trying to master chess, you're going to focus on the constitutive rules and what kinds of moves they allow for. So why wouldn't money be the same way? Why wouldn't money be the kind of thing that, although its history might be interesting, what we want is some kind of account when studying its ontology that potentially cuts free from its history. Why all this focus on history when we were trying to give a philosophical account of its ontology? Well, I think that the answer to that question is that we can take the functions, the accounts of the functions of money, and the two origin stories that we've got, and bring them together in order to see each of the two accounts as primarily presenting stories or accounts of the orders of explanation for how money functions the way that it does. According to the catalactic account, that is the Orthodox account, the medium of exchange version of the means of payment function is the primary function, and it explains all the other functions of money. So when we ask about the store of value and what kind of value is stored, according to the catalactic account, the value that is stored and then is denominated by the concept of money is exchange value. The possibility of money's use to denominate and pay debts, including those issued by the state, is explained by its use in market exchanges. That comes first, according to this account, and not the state and the state functions. The cartolist account, again, puts this mode of explanation on its head and says that the unit of account function is what's primary and explains the other functions of money. Keynes's definition from the Treatise of Money, given right up at the beginning of the treatise, is that if we want to understand money, we need to know that the money of account is the description or title of money, and then money is the thing that answers to that description. You start with the unit of account function, you think about the thing that answers to that function, and then you have understood money. It does not derive out of the thing being something being used as a universal medium of exchange in a market, where then the abstract concept develops as in a sort of secondary manner after the trading is already going on, being in using the what's taken to be the universal medium of exchange. So the debt expressing function of the concept of money explains anything that you can do with the physical tokens that represent and physically realize the debt, according to the cartolist account. The catalactic use of currency and its ability to hold exchange value then, according to this account, depend on its use to discharge taxes, fees, and fines to the state that issues it on the state theory version of the cartolist account. So when we recast the two different theories as theories of the orders of explanation of money and not mere histories of money's origin, they become competing views of the conditions under which monetary value is produced. According to the catalactic account, monetary value is produced in markets. And so monetary value just is exchange value, and exchange value is obviously produced in markets, so monetary value is produced in markets. Now, there's two ways that we can think about what the Cartolist is putting forward as their alternative to the Orthodox view. The first is that all monetary value is produced directly or indirectly by the taxes, fees, or fines paid for in state-issued money. Now, I think that there are some complications to this strong view. First off, how do we think about bank money, which may or may not be as dependent upon the state currency as the strong version of the Cartolist theory puts forward? And moreover, how do we think about private cryptocurrencies? They sure seem like money-ish sort of things if they're not money straightforward. It seems like mere table thumping to rule out that they're not money by saying, well, they're not issued by the state, so they can't be money. So I'm going to set this version of the Cartolist account aside to focus on a weaker version of the state theory, which is that the monetary value of what I'll call unpegged currencies, technically these are currencies that are sovereign currencies, and for the purposes of this talk, we won't get into all the criteria that need to be satisfied for a currency to be sovereign, is produced by taxes, fees, and fines paid for in state-issued money. An unpegged currency is one that is not directly exchangeable either for the currency of another state. So some countries peg the value of their currency to the value of the US dollar. And it's also unpegged if it cannot be directly exchanged for some amount of precious metal. At the turn of the 20th century, currencies were pegged to gold, and when we lived on the gold standard, but that's not been true for several decades now. So these are currencies whose values float on international exchange markets. The relevance of focusing on this kind of Cartolist account is that it's this version that suffices for critiquing economic orthodoxy. So what do I mean by critique, and why does it matter? Here is Michel Foucault, who gives us a nice statement of what the power of critique is and how we can use this ontological investigation into money as a argumentative tool in thinking about politics and policy. Foucault says that a critique is not a matter of saying that things are not right as they are. It is a matter of pointing out on what kinds of assumptions and what kind of familiar, unchallenged, unconsidered modes of thoughts the practices we accept rest. Criticism is a matter of fleshing out habitual thought and trying to change it, to show that things are not as self-evident as one believed, to see that what is accepted as self-evident will no longer be accepted as such. Practicing criticism is a matter of making facile gestures difficult. So I claim that if the weak Cartolist order of explanation correctly characterizes a currency, then post-Keynesian inspired policy proposals, including those that have been made popular recently by modern monetary theorists, but not just those of modern monetary theory, that are based on a currency can be defended. They're based on that currency, can be defended in part by appealing to Cartolism in critique. And here is an example that will help get us thinking along these lines. And then I'll close this discussion about the nature of money and its social ontology, which is the nature and purpose of taxes. So the habitual thought about taxes accords with the Orthodox view, the catalactic view of money. Money is what we use to pay for stuff in markets. Government has to pay for stuff just like the rest of us. That means the government has to go out and get money like the rest of us. And one of the primary ways that governments get money is taxes. Of course, another way is by lending bonds. And so you could run a similar argument for the sort that I'm about to run for taxes here for government quote unquote lending as well, thought about critically from the Cartolist point of view. Here's a new paradigm. And so this harkens back to the slide that I had earlier that talked about old and new paradigms. Here's a new paradigm on taxes, though, that, and I put it in scare quotes because this is something that folks who have been thinking about this have recognized for almost a century now on taxes, that becomes clear when you understand the social ontology of money to be Cartolist. As a matter of ontology, no government has to pay to get money. No government has to get money like the rest of us. We have to either work for money or we steal it, but the government doesn't have to do either of those things. As a matter of law, government with an unpegged currency of the sort I described on the last slide does not, in fact, get money like the rest of us at all. A government with this kind of currency uses taxes to destroy money, not collect it. All it needs to do to make more money is either issue more bonds or print more currency, but it doesn't need to go out and do anything to get the money. It just creates the money on its own. And there are complications here that involve the coordination of a central bank, but the basic idea is that the government and the central bank do not need to go out and get money like you and I do if we want to go buy stuff. Tax collecting then is not revenue raising activity for such a government as we might think if we're operating on the Orthodox view, but rather, again, a means of destroying currency that is circulating in the private economy. So critique then, to go back to Foucault's quote, is to show that things are not as self-evident as one is believed, to see that what is accepted as self-evident will no longer be accepted as such. This puts us in a position to take a Copernican turn on thinking about taxes and, again, bonds as well. Their function for a government with an unpegged currency, that is, again, put more technically, a sovereign currency, is not and cannot be to finance its activities, which is what politicians will often argue it is for. If a politician says we can't afford to do so and so because we would have to raise taxes or increase the deficit by issuing bonds, we should not accept that anymore. That is not as self-evident as we had believed, and we will not accept it as such. That's all that I've got for today. I thank you for listening to my talk.